The fear of missing out, FOMO, an aspect of our human psychology that historically has driven us to involve ourselves with the world, as there's always the risk that we lose out on a valuable experience if we don't. Simply put, a deep-seated fear of regretting how we spend our lives. Marketing departments have been aware of this since, marketing departments, and we're beginning to see it be used more and more effectively within the games industry. Can we protect ourselves from artificial value? Should we? What's actually going on here? How will it change over time? Well, let's dive into it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive episode. This time, it's about buying games at launch. Have you ever wondered why games drop off in price so quickly, and it seems to be quicker now than ever? Why do people clamor to pre-order AAA games despite being burned time and time again by those games? Well, there's more than a good reason, and it pains me to admit it, but it also cuts to the heart of a very interesting idea. Where in a game lies the value? For decades, fear of missing out is what was used to sell the big new game and its limited edition. The release of a game was an event that you would not want to miss out on. Counter to this, as always, was that games tended to drop in price after launch. For publishers, tapping into the fear of missing out adds significant value to a game at launch. The social furor around high-profile game launches, which is compounded by industry events, midnight releases, and dominating conversation, is a huge draw for many, driving launch sales and truly making a game's launch an event. This is obviously not unique to video games, and it's pervasive throughout all of society, with movie and television events, especially recently, being big worldwide cultural things. So that's really what I want to draw attention to and explain today. FOMO, how it's one of the major factors in adding value to games from the perspective of publishers, what publishers stand to gain by exploiting our psychology, how that might actually pan out in the future, and really just saying that knowledge is power and that, by being informed we can all make better decisions. Okay, games incentivize buying at launch with limited editions, pre-order exclusive content, and early access. The perceived value of these three can really, they can be argued, but there's at least some value there. There's a value that the developer and the publisher add to their product, and then they can charge more for. Limited editions tend to come with overpriced goods that are valuable precisely because of their limited availability, although they must be done so, within reason, something which Bethesda seemingly forgot with Fallout 76. These are usually cheaply produced figures, art books with developer comments or maybe a nice display box, but they usually sell quite well and provide a huge markup, turning a $60 game-only sale into a $120 sale, with the extra production costs in many cases being a small enough fraction of that 100% increase in revenue. They're a powerful way to increase the cost for the customer, and something that just about every publisher jumps in on. But at least the value there is tangible, right? It's an actual thing. And here's what we really need to get into with this video. Can the same be said for early access or even access to the game at launch for full price? Yes and no. It depends how we define value of a game, and this is a largely personal thing. It changes from game to game and person to person, but the enjoyment of a game can come from many different aspects of it. For simplicity, we're going to consider three angles of AAA games: the experience of the game as a standalone product, the social aspects of a game experience, and the shared experience of a multiplayer game. So, first of all, the experience of a game alone. This could be applied to really any game, but it is primarily what drives people towards single-player games, particularly those that have a very high production value and maybe have a strong narrative as well. Simply the enjoyment just of the game itself. Early access even detracts from value in this case in a way, as the game will have cost more and will not have been the final version. Arguments against buying a game at launch are predicated on this type of value, since waiting a few weeks can net you a price drop and some bug fixes, and waiting as much as a year could let you snatch up the Game of the Year edition of something that includes all the patches and all the DLC. It's often the best version of the game objectively, purchased for so much cheaper than the worst version of the game, which almost all the time is the launch version. As an example, I could go and pick up Horizon Zero Dawn or Nier right now, including all DLC for far, far, far less than the original game's price, and I could have an absolutely great time. I could pick up Persona 5 Royale next year and play a new and improved version of the game. Hell, if someone wanted to give Anthem a go, even if they just wanted to see what the backlash was about. If they did it right now, it would cost them so much less than launch, and the game would have, had some updates and will do for years to come. However, clearly, not everybody waits for the cheaper and superior game. Why not? Why do they buy in a more expensive and worse version of a game? If value comes from quality, why does everybody not make the obvious choice of waiting to buy a game? Well, for a start, there's the fear of missing out. But there has to be, something to miss out on for that fear to kick in, right? So, the launch of large games is an event within communities and friend circles, online and offline, and that's where the social elements of the experience kind of come in. When Red Dead Redemption 2 launched, there were just untold, numbers of stories and conversations held about each person's progress with the game, what they were doing, what they thought about the atmosphere, or, discussion of the potential plot developments. The same can be said for just about every game, but as gaming has grown and social media has exploded, the perceived importance of a game's launch, I think, really has been boosted further. Like with television and movies, the release of a big new game is pervasive. Everyone in your social circles will be talking about it, and ultimately, there is significant value to many people in taking part in the event. This most predominantly happens with widely appealing games, and games that provide unique experiences to each player, but it does happen with every game with enough hype up around its launch. Really, that's it. There is genuine value in being involved in those social events to many people, and in many situations, that is divorced from the quality of the game itself, as hard as it is to agree with that fundamentally. That's not the end yet, though. There's more. The next value add that publishers rely on is the fear of missing out on, an experience with your friends in-game. Getting to experience a new multiplayer game with your friends, especially ones that are designed to be played together in parallel, that's absolutely a huge part of what players value in games today, and it's how the industry's really shifted. This is apparent when you look at the sales and the reception of squad-based, loot-driven games like Anthem, The Division 2, and even the upcoming Borderlands 3. Games in which players can form up a group and progress alongside each other are games that really help to define the current era of gaming. I think that's undeniable for better or worse, and they provide an extremely compelling experience for many. They're immensely good at utilizing the fear of missing out because of that. You're missing out on a cultural event, that feels bad, everyone's talking about Claptrap, but then you miss out on the potential conversations with your friends and your workmates, but the strongest fear is missing out on that fun, shared experience. Refusing to join 3 good friends in picking up Borderlands 3 is not going to be easy for anyone, despite it being in the Epic Store. That kind of resigns the launch day conscientious objector from a few weeks of a potentially fun experience, and that's saying nothing of the hours spent discussing it in between play sessions. Honestly, games like these can be incredibly powerful experiences that requires the game to be nothing more than playable, which is kind of insane. And I think that's why we see so many games relying on this, and then having systems that incentivize and amplify that experience when playing with games, often to the detriment of the game itself. That's how powerful FOMO is and all of these social network effects. We even see early access used to reinforce group purchases. If person A pre-orders The Division 2, but person B was going to wait until the launch day and check out reviews and impressions, well, now person B is going to be left behind because of the early access, and they might be pressured into buying the early access version. And that's why early access is a pretty damn smart tactic from the publishers on this front, because it makes the real launch of a game even more expensive, or at least requires an early buy-in. By shifting back the release date and charging more for it, while the value added by playing a game at launch is now available at a higher price than ever in many of these cases. If you want to ride that cultural wave of the game a few days early, then pay up. Now, this is not being abused too hard yet, although I think we're going to see it get really egregious over time. Now, this is all beginning to get a bit down and a bit sad, so let's talk about something sort of positive. A fantastic example of those 3 types of value coming together is something like Risk of Rain 2. It's a great game designed to be played with a group of people, and it released with a time-limited offer where you get 2 for the price of 1. Now, that's classic FOMO marketing. That's totally fine. It's just another way of doing marketing. It's a great bargain on a timer, and it pushes groups to take a leap together, really for just enjoying that game when it's at the peak peak of its news cycle. Now, these concepts really all combined together for that launch, and just look how well it turned out. Risk of Rain 2 has been just an immensely successful game, and that's not entirely due to just the high quality of the game. There are many excellent games that fall under the radar in the indie world, but Hoppo Games used both the fear of missing out and their game hitting the news cycle to really guarantee success. And I just think it's very interesting as an overall topic to analyze. Given that Risk of Rain 2 is by all measures a good game, and the offer was framed as a very beneficial one, we are happy to forgive the fear of missing out sort of marketing. However, if you were to imagine, say, The Elder Scrolls 6 launching at an $80 RRP, but pre-orders get a $20 discount, or maybe Cyberpunk 2077 offering free exclusive DLC if you pre-order before the review embargo. I mean, sure, there are outlandish examples, but you kind of get the point. I mean, in those cases, you would have news articles and YouTube videos covering them to death. It's really, what's interesting to me is it's all about how these tactics are used. Is it, favorable or not? What is it like for the consumer? And I think Risk of Rain provided an exceptional value to its customers in just about every way. So in essence, there's an extreme amount of social and cultural value in a game at launch that dissipates extremely rapidly, and publishers, I mean, if they want to collect on that value, they're well within their rights to do so. Each of the methods described earlier have survived the test of time and will be utilized for as long as they still continue to. Yeah, you absolutely can argue that that value is artificial, and that is what the previous deep dive episode did. That's what it was focused on. Relying on the fear of missing out to sell copies at an inflated market value when the quality of the game should be what matters. There are many examples of games released at $60 that are inferior products to indie games released at half the price, maybe even, 2/10 of the price. However, an inferior product might be an absolute steal if the buyer gets enough out of it in terms of value. That's what's crazy. If somebody plays hours of, say, Fallout 76 and has a fun time, either playing with friends or talking about the game, then I mean, in a way, did they not get some form of a deal? Which is what's weird, and I think that's the odd thing. There's just this social value in games. There's even a social value in loving to hate a game. And I'm not saying that's worth anything in dollars, but it's clear that games as just cultural events are a very major part of the value proposition now. And I think they really are changing the game, so to speak. Now, I'm not going to defend releasing unfinished games, nor am I going to concede that it's, say a bad game is worth a whole bunch, or, as much as a good game, because fun is subjective and it's fine or whatever. I'm always going to be advocating for the highest quality experience possible. But that said, approaching these topics from different viewpoints is paramount to understanding the industry and making good, informed decisions as consumers. It's very easy to see why developers and publishers might want to make a game that's fun to play in a group, and to spend less time and less money on elements that don't support that core thing. It's just as easy to understand the desire for incredible games that are timeless experiences. What can be a little bit harder is to accept that some players are happy to pay more money to actually play a game at the peak of their own excitement. What does this mean for you as a consumer? What does it mean for all of us? Well, I think it means understanding the nuance of where value in your purchases actually is, and being aware of the tactics used to increase your own perception of that value. Now, these tactics are not necessarily predatory, as we discussed. Some of these things are just capitalizing on existing perceived value, as opposed to outright tricking anyone. When considering a game purchase, particularly a new game, I just think it's worth taking a step back and thinking about all of those factors. Do you really want to pre-order for the 3-day early access? Could you hold off for a few weeks to avoid launch day issues? Or will you miss out on a fun conversation about the game by doing so? Will you be behind your friends? Each person's going to have a different answer in those circumstances, and I think that's a part of making decisions in this gigantic games market. It's a pretty crazy situation. I think it's very interesting to talk around, because when you're talking about decision making and all of that stuff, it really is just all about human behavior, human psychology, and I think it's one of the most interesting things that we can analyze, because by doing so, it sort of holds up a mirror to ourselves, and when you do that, you kind of realize, oh, right, that's what I was thinking when I made that decision, oh dear. And I just think that's a sort of fun thing to do. So that's my thoughts on the fear of missing out and where value ends up lying in reality. If you've got any thoughts or questions on this really fascinating topic, please let me know down in the comments below. And finally, a massive shout out to our patrons for making this content possible. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.